Duty has had a long history of contradictions. Some are pretty minor, but some have had some pretty big consequences. So today, I want to talk about every time Call of Duty contradicted themselves. Now, the first one that I want to start with is tied to one of the greatest games in the franchise. That is Black Ops 1. During the Black Ops 1 life cycle, we got a zombies map called Call of the Dead. It was the first zombies map to have a full celebrity cast, and Treyarch leaned hard into that. With the promotion of this, they even released a trailer with interview segments from the actors themselves. Now, one part of that promo was Sarah Michelle Gellar, best known for Buffy the Vampire Slayer and the 2 Scooby-Doo movies, and in the marketing, she states that she would be the first woman playable in Call of Duty. Except that's not exactly true. The funny thing is, we actually played as a woman years earlier. If we rewind the clock all the way back to 2004 with Call of Duty Finest Hour, this was the first console Call of Duty, you meet a character called Tanya Pavlovna. Now, you meet this character in the first mission of the campaign, and then you play as her in the next mission, and then the 2 after that as well. So yeah, this is not exactly the first time a woman has been playable in Call of Duty. And like I said, it's a small contradiction, but it's still funny because it's a claim that sounds huge and it's instantly disproven by the second game of the series. But that's not the only time Call of Duty's marketing was wrong. During Call of Duty XP in September 2011, only 2 months before Modern Warfare 3 came out, Robert Bowling got on stage and dropped one of the most infamous promises in the franchise. Now, if you've played the older games, you already know why this became such a big deal. Last Stand was one of the most hated things in multiplayer. Now, it showed up as a standard perk in the earlier games, letting you drop down instead of die, pull out a pistol, and either get finished or sometimes squeak out a cheap kill. It was a kind of mechanic that could turn a clean gunfight into a mess instantly. So when people heard No Last Stand, they thought it meant that the entire idea was dead. But here's the contradiction. They promised No Last Stand, but they still put Last Stand in the game, just with a different name. And technically, it was true. In Modern Warfare 3, there was no perks or death streaks literally named Last Stand, but what we did get was something called Final Stand. And yeah, Final Stand is just Last Stand with a different name. You still go down instead of dying under certain conditions. You're still sitting there in a last chance state, and it still creates the same kind of annoying moments people wanted gone in the first place. So the promise was true in the most literal way possible, but in reality, it was the exact same concept sneaking back in under a different name, which is why fans have never let it go. But one of the funniest contradictions in the series is COD Ghost, because the marketing was screaming this next-gen product. This was the PS4 and Xbox One launch era, so Ghost got pushed hard as one of the first true next-gen Call of Duty. There's new engines, there's new tech, there's a new level of immersion, a whole deal. And the centerpiece of that marketing was the infamous fish AI. Like, we were supposed to look at a school of fish moving out of the way and go, yep, this is the future. Except when the game actually came out, it barely felt different between generations. Yeah, the next-gen versions looked cleaner. The PS4 ran at 1080p, while the PS3 and 360 were way lower, around 600p. And yeah, there were a couple visual upgrades like extra detail and stuff like dual scope rendering not working the same way on last gen in campaign, but none of that is really a true next-gen leap. It was mostly just sharper pixels. So yeah, that's the contradiction. They sold Ghost like it was a true next-gen leap, but it mostly looked and played like the same game, just sharper on the new consoles. It was basically the last-gen version that also happened to have a next-gen version. And that's why really nobody remembers Ghost for being revolutionary. They just remember fish. But speaking of cross-gen experiences, Black Ops 3 was the last time they tried this with PS3 and 360. The last-gen version was so bad it felt like a warning to never do it again. Now, Black Ops 3 was a demanding game. It had bigger and more open areas, a mind trip of a campaign, and zombies modes that was packed with moving parts and maps with dense geometry. It just wasn't built for hardware that dropped in the mid-2000s, and you can feel that immediately with the last-gen versions. Everything about this port screams compromise. The frame rate is slower and inconsistent, the visuals look rough, and the features get stripped out just to make it playable. There's no split screen, zombie support is limited with only 3 maps available, and the only DLCs being available are the first map pack plus the giant. Now the crazier thing is, now that the 360 marketplace is gone, you can't even buy the DLC on Xbox anymore. So the only way to experience these things is now either owning them before or playing on a PS3. But the biggest removal, and the one that really tells you how doomed this port was, is that it straight up launched without the campaign. It's the same game name, same box, same release, but one version is missing the entire campaign. Now, this is why the last gen version was $10 cheaper, and they tried to soften the blow by bundling in Black Ops 1 digitally, obviously without DLC. But what makes this port even funnier is who is behind it. Mercenary Technology was one of the studios assigned to it, already having Call of Duty experience because they co-developed Black Ops Declassified on the PS Vita, which is not exactly a confidence booster. Now, Beanox was also involved, being the main developer on the port, and after Black Ops 3, they'd basically settle into being one of the secondary support studios for the franchise. Now, I know that's a lot of info, but this is where the contradiction actually comes in. According to early plans, the campaign was actually supposed to exist on last gen at one point. It just would have been cut down to a 2-player co-op instead of a 4-player co-op that the new consoles got. But even that ended up being scrapped, and in late September of 2015, it was announced that last gen versions wouldn't include the campaign at all. While one mission could be accessed briefly through modding, it contradicted the fact that only with a month and change before release, suddenly Black Ops 3 last gen wasn't a full product worth full money. So yeah, Ghosts was a cross-gen game that didn't really feel next-gen. Black Ops 3 is what happens when cross-gen goes too far. It's the point where Call of Duty stopped pretending the older consoles could keep up, because this version was literally held together with tape. But wait, that is not all when it comes to bundling games together, because in May 2016, Infinity Ward announced Infinite Warfare with select editions of that game bundled with Modern Warfare Remastered. Now at launch in November 2016, that was the only way to get it. If you wanted Modern Warfare Remastered, you had to buy Infinite Warfare with it. And Activision went as far as to say you needed the Infinite Warfare disc to play the game, with the PS4 version being a code with the disc being the unlock key, and the Xbox version being directly on the disc. Now, they stayed true to this for months, right up until Modern Warfare Remastered finally dropped as a standalone release. That happened in June of 2017 on PlayStation, then in July of 2017 on Xbox and PC. Now, the second it went standalone, it sparked a whole new wave of backlash. For starters, it was the price. On its own, Modern Warfare Remastered launched at $50. And for a remaster of a game everyone had already bought at least once, the number instantly rubbed people the wrong way. But what really poured gas on it was that it didn't even include everything. The Variety Map Pack wasn't bundled with the standalone release, and that pack had its own controversy too. So you had this weird situation where a lot of people were saying the better deal was still buying the Infinite Warfare Legacy Edition bundle, because at least then you were getting a full game plus the remaster, instead of just paying $50 for just the remaster and then still having extra paid content sitting on top of it. People wanted MWR to be sold by itself, but when they finally did it, they priced it so high that people felt pushed back into the bundle anyway. And that's where the contradiction hits, because the whole reason people were mad in 2016 was that Modern Warfare Remastered was locked behind Infinite Warfare. People didn't want to be forced into buying one game just to get to another. Some critics even said that they wouldn't have minded the $50 price tag nearly as much if Modern Warfare Remastered had just launched as a standalone alongside Infinite Warfare in the first place. Instead, it felt like Activision did the exact thing that annoys people most. They used the nostalgia as leverage, sold it as a bundle to boost sales, then later sold it again as a standalone product at a premium price with extra content still separated. So even when Call of Duty does something people ask for, like making a remaster standalone, they still managed to do it in a way that left half the community going, okay, but why did you make it so annoying? And one thing that really annoyed people was how the next game handled historical accuracy, because COD World War II came out swinging like it was gonna be the serious, grounded return to form. And to be fair, World War II was already a dividing game. Everyone was happy it went back to boots on the ground, but the multiplayer launched with a bunch of systems that felt so off-brand that they had to overhaul the entire thing months later to just get it back on track. But even when the gameplay got cleaned up, the historical accuracy argument never went away, because that part wasn't something you can just patch out. Originally, Sledgehammer talked like World War II was going to be this authentically focused game. They kept using language about respect, honoring history, and grounding the experience. Then the multiplayer reveal happens, and immediately people are like, wait a second. First off, multiplayer barely had any Nazi logos. Swastikas were basically gone. And that instantly became a debate because some fans saw it as censorship, while others would note that this game was also being sold in Germany, where Nazi logos were banned in video games. Now, Sledgehammer's explanation basically confirmed the latter, that campaign is where the context is. Multiplayer is just a shared global mode, and they don't want to put that stuff in there. Plus, they've got to deal with regional rules and regulations. They even straight up framed it as campaign being the place that they aim for accuracy, and multiplayer being more of a playground where you can just be you. Then you've got the other multiplayer issue itself as well, the character customization. Because if you let everybody be themselves in World War II multiplayer, you end up playing with playable Axis soldiers who just don't line up with what the Axis actually was historically, including women and racially diverse German soldiers. And that's where the messaging got messy, because it's basically the game saying two different things at the same time. On one hand, we're doing a grounded World War II return, and on the other hand, it's Second Life. And it gets even weirder when you look at how the game talks about the German side. So even when they were trying to be careful, they literally stepped into a minefield. So at that point, Sledgehammer basically backpedals into the safest position possible and says campaign is where the historical accuracy is, and multiplayer is not a history lesson. They marketed the game like it was historically accurate, and then they turned around and said only one part of the game is accurate. Which, this sounds fair until you actually play the campaign and realize the idea doesn't hold perfectly either. Because this campaign still does take a lot of Hollywood shortcuts, because it speeds you through some iconic moments and locations, and it's very clearly built around this. This is the World War II Greatest Hits tour, more than a strict historical recreation. Even the dev interviews about the campaign talk about balancing authenticity with respect and presentation, not doing a one-to-one recreation of the war. And once you start looking closely, you can spot the cracks. For example, the campaign's D-Day section is designed around gameplay first, and not history first. It's built like a big cinematic funnel where you constantly are being pushed forward through set pieces, into bunkers, into scripted moments, and it doesn't really reflect how chaotic and unstructured the landings actually were for the first waves. It's not even that it's a bad mission, it's just that it's a very Call of Duty version of D-Day, which is kind of the opposite of the pitch they were selling. So the contradiction isn't that Call of Duty World War II is inaccurate, it's Call of Duty. It's always gonna take its liberties. What is that they sold it like it was gonna be this authentic driven World War II experience. Then the multiplayer immediately threw the historical accuracy out the window on purpose, and the campaign still ended up feeling like a dramatic, cinematic remix of World War II instead of the grounded historical recreation people thought they were being promised. But speaking of historical revisionism, we've got to give Vanguard's writers an honorable mention here, because during a panel about Vanguard, they said something like, Call of Duty has no iconic characters. And well, ladies and gentlemen, that is just a straight up contradiction of crazy levels. This series has had iconic characters for years. Woods and Mason are basically the face of Black Ops. Price and Soap are the modern warfare duo everyone remembers, even if they've never even touched the campaign. So hearing no iconic characters feels like someone tried to rebrand the franchise franchise while forgetting what made it popular in the first place. And honestly, it didn't help Vanguard's case that most people can't name half the cast off the top of their head. The only one that really stuck with a lot of fans was Polina, and even then, that's more she stood out than she's iconic, and I don't even know if I pronounced her name right. And what was also iconic about Call of Duty was the amount of gaslighting that went into pretending that MW3 was always meant to be a full game and not an expansion. Because, according to the reporting at the time, Modern Warfare 3 started life as a year 2 continuation for Modern Warfare 2. Basically, it was going to be a premium add-on to what would feel like a big extension instead of a totally new entry into the franchise. Now, the idea, again, according to those reports, was that it'd keep building off of MW2 and reuse a lot of that foundation instead of starting from scratch. Then the story changes. Multiple reports later said Activision pivoted in the summer of 22, and the expansion-sized project got rebooted into a full 2023 game, which meant that Sledgehammer had to turn something that wasn't originally scoped as a normal annual release into one anyway. That's where the whole rush dev cycle narrative comes from, with reporting that the game ended up being built in roughly 16 months, which is insanely short for a modern Call of Duty game. Now, to be fair, this is where the contradiction gets messy, but it's still salvageable, because Sledgehammer publicly pushed back and denied the idea that it was scrapped together in 16 months and denied framing that it was some last-minute job. So depending on whoever you believe, either MW3 was always the plan or it got upgraded midstream and everyone had to sprint. One side said it started as an expansion, the other side said it didn't. Someone is not being honest, and fans can feel that, and with the leaked documents leading it to be an expansion first, my money is on MW3 being a full game. A contradiction. Either way, the reason people call it out is simple. Players could feel that MW3 launched like a game trying to prove it wasn't just an add-on. And thankfully, over its life cycle, Sledgehammer did what they always end up doing. They kept patching, updating, and improving until it felt way better than it did at launch. Now, finally, we get to the most recent back-to-back sequel, and this is one that really shows how much the brand has been wobbling lately. Now, the Black Ops 7 hype was rough. It felt like a low point where even the diehards were kind of tired. And honestly, that sentiment still holds 2 months later. It's gotten to the point where Activision even had to come out and say that they aren't doing back-to-back Modern Warfare or Black Ops releases anymore, which is basically corporate speech for, yeah, we pushed this way too hard. And part of the reason people were so checked out was the identity crisis. Now, Black Ops 6 went so hard on collabs that it didn't match the tone of the game at all. We had stuff like American Dad, Beavis and Butthead, TMNT, and the list goes on. It was so infamous that even Battlefield made fun of the skin situation in a trailer before Battlefield 6 came out. Now, this led Activision and Treyarch coming out and saying that Black Ops 7 would feature collabs that actually make sense with the game. And then the first collab happened, which was Fallout. Now, it does and doesn't make sense. Now, the reason it does is that both Fallout and Call of Duty are both now owned by Xbox. But what doesn't make sense is that Fallout still feels a bit fantastical for Call of Duty, a series that started as a gritty World War II shooter that took itself pretty seriously. Not even that, it was also discovered that the game would make heavy use of generative AI, and it's found to be used extensively through the artwork in the game as well, and is possibly the campaign mode too. Now, this isn't the first time the series has been caught using AI, and it probably won't be the last. But hey, if we counted up every bit of irony and contradictory stuff the campaign has to offer, we'd be here for an hour. So yeah, Black Ops 7 was supposed to be the course correction. Less random collabs, more identity, more focus, but the first collab is Fallout, the AI debate is right there, and that pretty much is Call of Duty in a nutshell. Every time they fix one thing, they accidentally hand you 2 or more contradictions for free. And ladies and gentlemen, that is every time Call of Duty contradicted itself. If you guys think I missed some, let me know down in the comments and let me know what you think is the worst one. It might be Black Ops 7 for me, I'm not gonna lie. But I hope you enjoyed the video. Leave a like if you did, subscribe if you're new, and we'll see you in the next one.